Mr. Speaker, it's a very great pleasure to stand here before you as an elected member and support the largest budget ever presented in this country's history. And I'm also very pleased to stand here as the Minister of Culture, Youth and Sport to also say that this is the largest budget for the Ministry of Culture, Youth and Sport in this country's history. And I'm also pleased, I have to say as well, to hear the honorable member of the other side who spoke a moment ago, to actually hear his voice. From the last parliament, I did not hear his voice one time. One time. Mr. Speaker, I have listened to members from the APNU AFC who are attempting to criticize this budget and the People's Progressive Party government. And I ask myself, who are these people who have proven that they cannot even run a pig pen and now claim that they can be a better government? And I've said to the honorable member of the other side, don't get personal with me. I've said that to all of them, don't get personal with me. All know the pigs from the sled fund can't be found. All know. Where is the piggy, Figgy? Where is the piggy? You just came out of power. You had your chance to run this country. You spent $1.4 trillion of taxpayers' money. When you came, you found Guyana in 2015 with $10 billion in surplus in the central bank. You left it with $92 billion in overdraft. You found $20 billion of gold reserves. It is now decreased to $500 million. The current account deficit is 1.8 billion US dollars when you left office. All of that money was spent, and your marquee projects that you have completed was an overpass, a roundabout, and $1.6 billion on the Durban Park project. And $600 million of that money can't be found. Can't be found. APNU AFC, they promised jobs. We lost over 30,000 jobs. And the president of the country, when asked about what is his job creation plan, he told Guyana to go and sell cook-up rice, pepper sauce, and plantain chips. They promised young people would occupy the position of government. And they ended up with a government of geriatrics. People like James Bond and Trevor Williams and Malika Ramsey, up to today, they can't find their voices, they can't recover. They promised to reduce taxes and raise taxes on everything. Even the small man got pressured. Put VAT on electricity, put VAT on telephone, put VAT on data. Even love became more expensive. You can't even get more love in the country. Even the donkey cart wasn't spared the wrath of the tax whip. They promised free education. David Granger himself in 2015 promised free education, and in the 5 years, they raised tuition fees by 35%. Put VAT on electricity. The president of the country, His Excellency Dr. Irfan Ali, said that there will be free university education by 2024. They promised transparency and accountability, and they hid the $18 million US signature bonus and lied about it. Promised adherence to the rule of law,
Honorable
And
Minister, and they lied about it. I think the lying word is the wrong word. And then the other issue is addressing the chair.
they ducked it. How about that? They promised the adherence of the rule of law, and the invisible president breached the Constitution multiple times. And it's not me say so. It's there's this Caribbean Court of Justice that says so. And I got the extract, and I'm laying all of these documents that I have here over with the Parliament at the end of my speech. It says here in the GCOM Patterson case, it says in the final paragraph, final sentence on the first paragraph, and the reference is 2019 CCJ 13 AJ. It says in this, the GCOM chairman case, in quotations, the court concluded that the process that resulted in the unilateral appointment by the president of a chairman of GCOM was flawed and in breach of the Constitution. The first time in the history of this country that a court ruled that this president, that a sitting president, breached our Constitution. And then they try to insult the intelligence of the Guyanese people by telling us that 33 is not a majority of 65. Embarrassed the country, spent hundreds of millions of dollars, embarrassed the country to take the case to the CCJ. And we took, this is the extract from the case. It says here at the caption, what is the majority necessary for the passage of a no confidence motion? The sentence says, one does not have to study law to appreciate that the word majority means the greater of two parts. APNU told this country that they had changed their ways. They had changed their names. They first, from PNC, they changed to PNC One Guyana, then to One Guyana, then to Reform, then to One Guyana Reform.
Mr.
And
Speaker,
up to now,
Mr. Speaker, Standing Order 40A, 41.1 says that the member shall confine his and her observation to the subject on the discussion.
Okay, Honorable Member,
on the budget.
you stand on a point of order and you wait to be acknowledged. You don't be like a runaway train.
Sorry, sir. My
right?
apologies.
So you're standing on 41. What is the point of order?
41.1, a member shall confine his or her observations to the subject under discussion. I don't think that is what the honourable member is speaking about.
Honourable Member, I don't uphold that as a point of order. We will have to do some more lessons. Honourable Minister, please continue.
apparently she wasn't listening when you ruled on that already, Mr. Speaker. They told this country that the AP and you had changed their ways, changed their clothes, that they don't want to rig the elections, and they tried to rig the elections in front of the entire world and took 5 months to give up power. Recorded in the Guinness Book of World Record, gave Guyana the ignoble embarrassment of being recorded in the Guinness Book of World Record for 5 months to refuse to give up power. And David Granger, I have to say, knew that he was planning to rig the election when he started with the appointment of Justice Patterson, and read the speech that he made, which is recorded in the Demerara Waves on the 5th of November, 2017, the title, Regaining and Retaining Power, Big Questions for the PNCR. It says here, and I quote, this is what he said at the address at the 5th biannual conference of the PNCR's North American region in Atlanta, Georgia. I quote, whatever you will choose to discuss today and the weeks and months to come, I think that there are several questions that you have to ask yourselves as you look to the future. You have to ask yourself, how did the PNC gain office in 1964? Ask yourself, how did the PNC remain in office? And what did you do during that period? Ask yourself, how the PNC gained power in 2015? And ask yourself, how the PNC retained power after 2020? I'm placing all of this here before this Parliament because there must be a record kept by this honorable House. And imagine that you were the leader of a country and you saw all of that shenanigans going on and all the discord and disquiet happening in this country at the Ashman's building. When I was there, I was present. I saw when they shut down the building, removed the locks from the doors. And all of that happened, and David Granger did not have a care in the world to go to find out what occurred. And on June 14th, 3 months later, when he was doing an interview the day after the Caricom report was concluded and submitted and presented to this public, he did an interview right in State House where he was asked the question, has he ever seen the statements of polls? 3 months later, the president of the country who realizes that there is problems in relation to what is the actual tabulation and calculation of the statements of polls. And he said 3 months later that he hasn't seen the statements of polls. All he saw was a spreadsheet, and he believed that that spreadsheet was the accurate one. Well, let me tell the honorable member, Ms. Joretta Fernandes, because you brought an issue about our constitutionality and why it is that we are in power. Well, I brought the report from Caricom, and let me advise what it says, some of the things of what it says, because this is in its executive.
Mr. Speaker.
Honorable member, please, go ahead.
Thank you, sir. Just for clarity's sake, if you can help me here. I remember you said that matters that are sub judice should not be spoken about. As far as I know, we have 2 petitions that are actually in the court and should not be spoken about in the Parliament.
This is a public report. It's not. The contention is not based on the report. I'm reading a public report.
Thank you, Honorable Minister. Honorable Minister, remember, as you promised, to lodge all those.
All of these I'm lodging. All of these. It says from the outset, the team wishes to acknowledge that the exercise that we observed was not, in fact, a recount. It was an audit of the votes cast on March 2nd, and from the start it was conceived as an audit, notwithstanding the statement on the national recount. A recount of votes means exactly that, a counting of the ballots. In this case, the so-called recount extended to issues normally reserved for the audit of ballots cast. The team did not witness anything which would render the recount and, by extension, the casting of the ballot on March 2nd so grievously deficient procedurally or technically, or sufficiently deficient to have thwarted the will of the people and consequently preventing the election results and its declaration by GCOM and reflecting the will of the voters. The actual count of the vote was indeed transparent. I have another part to mention here because they spoke about phantom voting. The numerous requests for information on serial numbers were so bizarre that on one observed occasion, an APNU AFC agent was prepared to query serial numbers on the OLE in a workstation where no one had voted. These challenges were often made on the grounds of debt and migration. Presumably, therefore, the contention is that the March 2nd polls, the phenomenon of ghost voting occurred, as well as the voter impersonation and other forms of voter fraud. The team viewed much of the exercise as a fishing expedition. In their conclusions, this is what they said: the team categorically rejects the concerted public efforts to discredit the 2020 polls up to the disastrous Region 4 tabulation. Despite our concerns, nothing we witnessed warrants a challenge to the inescapable conclusion that the recount results are acceptable and should constitute the basis of a declaration of the results of the March 2nd, 2020 elections. This is the report. Don't open the doors. Don't open the doors if you don't know where the room will lead. Don't open the doors. This is the executive summary from the CCJ. It says here that the application, you want to talk about the constitutionality of our positions. The ruling of the CCJ said this: the application challenged the credibility of the count by GCOM under Order 60. Ms. Eslyn David requested an interpretation of the phrase "more votes cast" in Article 177(2)(b) of the Constitution, and she asked the court to restrain the CEO from complying with the GCOM chair's direction without GCOM first determining the credibility of the elections under Order 60 and Section 96. Here is what they concluded. They said that unless and until an election court decides otherwise, the votes already counted by the recount process as valid votes are incapable of being declared invalid by any person or authority. By unnecessary insertion of the word valid, the Court of Appeal impliedly invited the CEO to engage unilaterally in an unlawful validation exercise. This trespassed on the exclusive jurisdiction of the High Court established by Article 163. It was inconsistent with the constitutional framework for the CEO or GCOM to disenfranchise thousands of electors in a seemingly non-transparent and arbitrary manner without due process established in Article 163 and the Validation Act. You ask us about our constitutionality. Nothing that you can say can determine constitutionality. You're not even wise enough to understand that there's a separation of powers, that when you have the lawmakers and you have the judiciary to interpret what the law should be, and that is what occurred. You also promised that you would end corruption, and the misleading mantra of boots and boats and bicycles turned out to be bangles, bracelets, and bed sheets. The 400 million drug bond scandal, BK's best friend, Hardat Singh, Bai Shingling the jet trip, the land scandals, $1 billion to Sarah. You have members in this honorable house between the period of January 2020 and March 2020, 3 months, deposited $90 million in their bank account. $90 million in their bank account, 3 months. And they also transferred $400,000 US to an account in Texas. Everybody was on some kind of hustle. You have somebody, you got fuel smuggling, you got gun license. Everybody was on some kind of hustle. So, and the desperation to retain power degenerated to campaigns at funerals. And then the honorable members of the APNU AFC has the nerve to complain and allege about dead voting. Imagine you took 23 years to get back power, and this is what you did with it. So, for the first time in my life, I'm going to find myself agreeing with the honorable member, Mr. Ramjatan, when he said that it's not true to say that the APNU AFC did nothing. They did do something. They did a lot of damage to this country. They did a lot of damage to the people of this country. And I also, as I'm on the subject of the honorable member, Mr. Ramjatan, I heard him also say that he disagrees with the cash injection to Gaisuko. For a man that has an affinity for brown rum, one would expect that he would want to keep the sugar estates open. So you had your 5 years.
Mr. Speaker.
You had your 5 years. Now let the real people
Mr. Speaker.
run its government.
Mr. Speaker, my apologies. The honorable member, Mr. Kemra. The honorable member, Kemraj Ramjatan, is trying to get your attention, sir.
Honorable member, Mr. Ramjatan, you want to get my attention?
Non-parliamentary about brown rum.
And the innuendo is quite clear. Ramjatan is involved with brown rum.
Thank you,
What
honorable
is
member.
that? I mean,
Honorable Minister, you may continue.
When the heart fit, right? When the heart fit, you just draw the string. That's what old people say. You just had your 5 years. This is a new government. We've come into office. Let us run our program and let the people of the country be the judge of our records as they were the judge of your records. Go and ask. Already there's strong signs that there's economic recovery. Go and ask the retailers in this country what Christmas was like, and they will tell you that even in a pandemic, this was the best Christmas that they have had in the last 5 years. Money was on the road. Money was on the road. And the honorable member, Mr. Patterson, Mr. Bangles, he said on an interview that this was going to be a very dark Christmas. That is what he said. Turned out to be untrue. And get comfortable, because it will be 30 years before you smell power again. And mark my words on this. We in the People's Progressive Party, we don't gaff. And in politics, this is not a gaffing game. And let me place on record right now, we told you in 2015 that we were coming back for power. And we did so when you controlled the public service, the government, the executive, the police, the army. We did all of that and took power from you. And I'm going to place on record now that we're coming for 3 more seats. And if you continue to behave this way, we're coming for 5. I'm placing it on record now. This is a budget debate. It's supposed to be the examination of a macroeconomic health of the country, and the debate proposed so far by the government for the fiscal year. What is interesting, however, that their economic czar, the man who lost them the election, is still Winston Jordan, the man who thought that the signature bonus was a gift, the man who went into South and said that he used to see Jumbie when he was a little boy. He said, what we instead had is incoherent and contradictory arguments coming from the other side. One set is saying that the AP and these are AP and new AFC projects, but in the same breath, they said that they don't want to support the budget. One set saying that we should do more for COVID, another set saying that we're borrowing too much. If it is in COVID, where are you getting the money to do more for COVID people who are affected by COVID? No financial and economic analysis. All we had from the AP and UAFC and their obedient, what we have had from the APNU and their obedient lackey is the AFC is an attempt at race baiting rhetoric, which further seals their fate as a group of people who will become extinct like the dodo bird, which they emulate. But despite this inevitable self-destruction, the Parliament is a place where there's a record that is kept. There's a Hansard. And in relation, and we're obligated to respond. They said, I want to place on record, as we have done many, many times already, public servants will get a bonus this year. And it is almost never the case that a bonus is announced during the budget speech. Never. And the claim that we're attacking the public service and by extension Afro-Guyanese, assuming that the vast majority of public servants are Afro-Guyanese, is in and of itself requires further elucidation. And history has a way of providing clarity. What I have here is a photocopy of particular sections of the 1992 budget presented by none other than Carl Greenidge. Carl Greenidge presented this budget on the 30th of March, 1992. And in this table at the last, at page 92, page 93, there's a section in the table which does employment and labor. In 1985, the public service had 28,686 persons. By 1991, it went down to 18,361. The PNC fired 10,000 public servants. 10,000 public servants. And it didn't finish there. The PNC, after they nationalized Denver in 1971, they fired the same, when you go by Spikeland, when you go and see that rusty factory which was closed down, they fired 2,000 workers, 40% of their workforce from Denver. And then you have to then come and lecture us about your love for public servants. And furthermore, you destroyed and pauperized the lives of fixed income workers with the economic mismanagement during that period. Pauperized. When the exchange rate moved from 4 to 1 to 124 to 1, in just 6 years, you destroyed their purchasing powers, pauperized public servants in this country. And the fact is that your argument is self-defeating, because if the PPP inherited a public service where Afro-Guyanese dominated the public service in 1992, and when we left in 2015, it was still dominated by Afro-Guyanese, it means that the Afro-Guyanese weren't targeted in the 23 years that we were in office. So there is no question about our position on this. No one will be expected to be targeted by us, excepting the people who would have done financial crimes, who are holding offices, public offices. They have to be held to account. And when you are faced with these kinds of facts, you always return to the dark period in this country, ignoring that under your watch, there wasn't 400 persons who were murdered. There were 700 persons who were murdered in the last 5 years. That is the record. That is the record. By the quote-unquote security experts, 700 murders occurred in the last 5 years. And as it relates to debt, because I know that there's a lot of people talking about debt, the Honorable Member, Ms. Director of Finance, had said that this is the largest level of debt that we've ever had. That is not true. In our country, in 1992, you had an economy that was 300 million US dollars, and our debt was 700% of that. So if your economy was this, the size of your debt was this. And the debt, the size of the debt is not the aggregate that matters, it's the relative position. The relative position. It is the debt relative to your GDP. No amount of shouting can change the facts. No amount of shouting can change the facts. And when you examine our deficit as a percentage of GDP, it is 8.7%. It is 8.7% of our GDP. So don't come and mislead people in this country about what is our debt and what are we being concerned about. We are in a time of crisis too. We are in a time of crisis too. COVID caused, there are a number of issues that occurred in the last 5 years.
Honorable Minister, you are going to be in a time of crisis if you don't get an extension. Honorable Minister Gator Shearer.
Mr. Speaker, I'd like to ask that the honourable member be given 5 minutes more to conclude his presentation.
Thank you, Honorable Minister Shearer. Honorable Minister Ramson, please continue.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. I have set, in relation to our ministry, I've set my ministry a mission to develop and showcase young Guyanese talent. And the mission is aggressively advancing, and the ministry is aggressively advancing that mission. When I came to the ministry, it wasn't even a ministry. The national voice in government for culture, youth, and sport was kicked into a department within the ministry. It lacked leadership in a major way. It had no vision, no passion, no energy. The organizational structure was weak. Imagine the Ministry of Culture, Youth, and Sport, when I got there, had 6,000 likes on Facebook. Today it has over 22,000 likes on Facebook, 25,000 followers. And we will be launching our website in another few weeks as it is in the final stages. And I'm surprised that the ministry was in this state. I'm not surprised, because they took their cue from their absent president, because he was a sailor. 5 years to complete the Green State strategy, and it cost this country $2 million US, 400 million Guyana dollars, and asked any of them what it means. None of them could tell you what the Green State strategy was, and none of them would be able to tell you that it would have costed this country over $1 trillion to implement. Even more interesting that I said, what is important to note, that even in a pandemic, that we are an events-driven ministry. We've already done more in 6 months than the AP and UAFC 3 ministers has done in the last 5 years. And we have tapped into an untapped resource, which we have found that the country wants to be able to build with this government. And I've personally visited and assessed community grounds and started doing work with those grounds in the following: Burnham's Park, New Amsterdam, Albion Sports Complex, Port Morant Community Ground, Chesney Ball Field, Cane Field, Agricola Community Ground, Golden Fleece Ground, Reliance Ground, Lima Ground, Anna Regina Ground, Affiance Ground, Pomona Community Ground, Aurora, Rose Hall, Kanji, Jai Hind, Hampshire, Crabwood Creek, Line Path, Number 70, Wim, Buxton Community Ground, Better Hope Community Center, LBI Community Center, Enterprise, Enmore, Linden, Tushen, Metamizorg, Zeeburg, Cornelia Ida, Zealot, Crane, Go Ahead Fortune, Caracara, Spiteland, The Hoop, Fairfield, Mahika Branch Road, Dundee School, Bushlot Ground, Bath Settlement, the Edward Ground, Blairmont Number 3, Tiger Bay, GCC, Maltinos, Everest, and DCC. And we haven't even stepped on the gases yet. The majority of these grounds were in terrible shape. There was a ground that we found in Zambia that I took the media to. $20 million was spent, and up to this day, the ground cannot be used. It looks like a jungle. Many of these grounds were assisted already through our ground enhancement program. We have already started to distribute sports gear so that we can get young people starting to play sports again. And when I came into the ministry, they had an entire section of sports gear that was dry rotted. The National Sports Commission, and I heard the honorable member speak about the National Sports Commission. The National Sports Commission was appointed in 2017, and in 2 years, they had 3 meetings. 2 years, they had 3 meetings. They never laid in this parliament, they never had audited statements, they never laid in this parliament as they're required to do by the act, those statements, they never submitted reports to the previous minister. The entire place was in a disaster. But immediately after here, Mr. President, as we get out of this budget debate, the ministry will be appointing the commission, the sports commission, and we will be making our new appointment to the director of sport. And an investigation will be launched too, Mr. Speaker, because I've seen a number of untoward things occurring there. The tracks, I have to mention the tracks. The only project that was done in the last administration, it started in 2018. They said that it would have been completed in 2019. Then he went back and said that it would have been completed in 2020. It is now 2021 and it's still not completed. But the People's Progressive Party will come and finish your job. And I have to show this country what had occurred during that period of time, because the previous administration requested that they needed a change of color from the track.
Honorable Minister, you will have to conclude.
They changed the color of the track, and in order to change the color of the track, it would have costed this country almost $30 million. And you know what color they wanted to change the track to? Green and yellow. Green and yellow. And this APNU AFC government needs to apologize to this country for attempting to brainwash this country by painting everything green and yellow. Painting everything green and yellow. Mr. Speaker, I will take the additional time outside of this engagement to explain our entire program during our budget estimates, because we have run out of time. But it's very important that we respond to a number of these things that the honorable members have said. And I am very pleased to support the largest budget in Guyana's history and the largest allocation for the Ministry of Culture, Youth and Sport.